The Japanese auto industry has always had two faces. For the outside world, Japan built the Corolla, the Camry, the Land Cruiser, and other global models designed around the tastes and rules of other countries. But for Japan itself, it built very different cars. Small, practical, and often very unusual K cars that made perfect sense at home, but were almost impossible to understand outside Japan. And yet both of these worlds shared one common image. A Japanese car meant modernity, reliability, and technology. That was how the world was used to seeing Japan, as the country of high-speed trains, electronics, robots, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. But there was also a third, completely separate automotive world in Japan: Japanese taxis. Against all this high-tech background, many Japanese taxis looked like fossils from the 1970s. Old-fashioned bodies, simple interiors, white seat covers, strict drivers and gloves, and an incredible contrast with the neon streets of Tokyo. And today, we will try to understand why that happened. Did the Japanese deliberately preserve this conservative image of the taxi, or was it just a strange coincidence? There are not many countries in the world where the auto industry produced passenger cars that were never intended for sale to private buyers. Of course, the first example that comes to mind is the Soviet Union, where station wagons and government limousines were not sold to ordinary citizens. The former were officially considered too convenient for earning unofficial income, and with the latter, I think everything is clear. But there were examples in the United States as well. An ordinary buyer could not simply walk into a dealership and buy a new Ford Crown Victoria Police Interceptor or Chevrolet Caprice Police Patrol vehicle. Japan also had its own cars that were not really aimed at the private market. And, as you have probably guessed, these were Japanese taxis. These cars go to work every day, without weekends, holidays, or any discount for bad weather. So the requirements for them are different from those for ordinary passenger cars. In practice, there are three main requirements: reliability, repairability, and low running costs. Because cars like these were always produced in relatively small numbers, they were usually not developed from scratch. Instead, they were built on existing platforms, with a high level of shared parts and components. Of course, there were exceptions, such as the American Checker Marathon or the famous London Taxi. But in most of the world, taxi cars were usually close relatives of existing production models. The widely used Nissan Crew taxi, which entered production in the summer of 1993, was no exception. Structurally, it was close to Nissan's rear-wheel drive sedans of the time and became the successor to earlier taxi models based on the Laurel and Bluebird. The Crew was developed as a service vehicle, mainly for taxis, driving schools, and police use. Design had never been the strongest side of the Japanese auto industry, and in the case of the Crew, Nissan clearly did not spend much effort on styling. The car looked old-fashioned, if not outdated. But for a taxi, that was far from the most important thing. The main feature of the Nissan Crew was its asymmetrical body. The left rear door was about 50 millimeters longer than the right one. The Crew also had not only a larger opening, but a wider opening angle for the left rear door. The body height was 1.46 meters, about 8 centimeters taller than the Nissan Cedric. This was pure taxi logic. A passenger should be able to get into the back seat with a bag, in a suit, at an older age, or simply without having to lower themselves into a low car. Another important feature was the power-operated left rear door. For Japanese taxis, this is almost a cult detail. The passenger does not pull the handle themselves. The driver opens the door from inside the car. And the asymmetry was not limited to the rear passenger door. It also applied to the front driver's door. The larger driver's door was meant to improve comfort for the taxi driver, who has to get in and out of the car many times during a shift. Technically, the Crew was as conservative as possible. Front engine, rear-wheel drive, a simple body shape, good visibility, and conventional suspension. In the standard taxi version, it came with a 2-liter, 82-horsepower LPG engine, a 4-speed manual transmission, and steel wheels. More expensive versions could be equipped with a 2-liter gasoline inline-6, producing 130 horsepower, or a 2.8-liter diesel with 94 horsepower. Later, the engines were updated. The output of the basic LPG engine rose from 82 to 85 horsepower, while the diesel was increased to 100 horsepower. After the Nissan Crew appeared on Japanese roads, it turned out that taxi companies, driving schools, and the police were not the only ones interested in this utilitarian sedan. So, in 1994, Nissan introduced a separate civilian version called the Crew Saloon, which ordinary Japanese buyers could purchase. It remained in production until 2002. Despite its old-fashioned design, average performance, and modest equipment, the Crew Saloon found its audience. It was a simple, tough, almost unkillable sedan, even by Japanese standards. By the end of the 2000s, demand for the Nissan Crew began to fall, and keeping an old platform car in production was becoming more expensive. Besides, the Crew had never been built in large numbers. Even in its best years, production was measured in hundreds of cars per month, not mass market volumes. So in August 2009, the Nissan Crew was retired. In total, a little over 52,000 sedans were built over 16 years of production. Not the most impressive number for the Japanese auto industry, but for such a narrow service model, it was a perfectly logical result. But Nissan was not the only player in this niche. Toyota, Japan's leading automaker, also paid attention to the segment of service sedans. In 1995, the company introduced a direct rival to the Nissan Crew, the Toyota Comfort. In terms of size, the Toyota Comfort was close to the Crew, but Toyota made its car even taller to make entry and exit easier. The body was about 6 centimeters taller than the Nissan Crew, and those extra centimeters were not there for style. They were there for comfort. A passenger could get into the back seat without almost folding themselves in half. Passengers often praised the Toyota Comfort for its spacious interior, but Toyota went even further and introduced a long wheelbase version called the Toyota Crown Comfort. Its wheelbase was increased by 10 centimeters. The car was based on the Toyota Mark II sedan. It had a unibody structure with subframes, McPherson strut front suspension, and a rear axle with coil springs. Until 2008, the Comfort was offered with gasoline engines, producing between 123 and 141 horsepower, diesels with 90 to 96 horsepower, and LPG versions, producing between 78 and 111 horsepower. After that, the engine lineup was simplified sharply. The Toyota Comfort was left with a single 2-liter, 113 horsepower engine, capable of running on gasoline and gas, paired with a 4-speed automatic transmission. As with the Nissan, Toyota did not spend much effort on styling. The Comfort looked simple and plain, but it fit its purpose perfectly. In basic trim, especially in the driving school version, the equipment was modest. 14-inch steel wheels, vinyl interior trim, and manual windows. More expensive versions could get central locking, power windows, and climate control. And since the car was also sold to private buyers, options included leather seats, power-adjustable seats, wood-style trim, a multimedia system with navigation, and other equipment. Unlike the Nissan Crew, the Toyota Comfort went far beyond Japan. Taxi drivers in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Indonesia, where traffic also keeps to the left, came to love it. The car had strong export potential, and total production of the Comfort was many times higher than that of the Nissan Crew. First, the Comfort was produced from 1995 to 2018, 7 years longer than the Nissan Crew. Second, if the Nissan had a reputation as a fantastically reliable sedan, the Toyota Comfort and Toyota Crown Comfort were considered even tougher. There are known cases of these cars covering 500,000 kilometers or more, with nothing beyond routine maintenance. But times were changing, and a very unexpected successor was about to replace the traditional Japanese taxi. The Japanese government decided that the new taxi should not be just another sedan adapted for taxi work. It had to be a car designed from the start as a taxi. The model chosen as inspiration was the London cab, not only in concept, but also in appearance. In 2013, Toyota showed the JPN Taxi concept, and in October 2017, the production version was launched. The Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games were 3 years away, and the government wanted visitors to see a new generation of modern taxis, designed from the beginning to carry passengers in wheelchairs. But for all its technology, The Toyota JPN Taxi turned out to be controversial. It was built on a platform related to the Sienta and became a tall front-wheel drive wagon. For passengers, that was a plus. For drivers, it meant losing the familiar feel of a classic sedan. Japanese sources wrote that drivers complained about weaker maneuverability and less pleasant behavior on the road. There were smaller problems as well. The JPN Taxi had a modest trunk, the passenger door opened slowly on early versions, and the wheelchair ramp had to be unfolded manually by the driver. For taxi companies, the main problem was the price, about 3.5 million yen, or roughly $32,000. That was noticeably more expensive than the familiar Toyota and Nissan sedans. The car was also more complex, with a hybrid powertrain and a long list of electronic driver aids. Even the styling was not accepted by everyone. Some Japanese people did not understand why a Japanese taxi had to copy the British cab so openly. Toyota said the project was unprofitable for the company, because the car would not be built in large numbers. So the government had to support both the manufacturer and taxi companies with subsidies. But that did not change the overall picture. The JPN Taxi became one of the most expensive taxis in Japanese history. The old Nissan Crew and Toyota Comfort were simple, durable machines built around the driver, the taxi company, and cheap daily operation. The Toyota JPN Taxi was built around a different logic: the passenger, accessibility, ecology, and a new image of Japan before the Olympics. Today, the replacement of old taxis with the Toyota JPN Taxi is almost complete across Japan. But whether this car will become as iconic as its predecessors is something we will only know in 20 years, or maybe 25.